Goa has also had a tremendous track record in industry. Linked to industry is banking. And linked to banking is the ability to enable people to be empowered financially to create opportunities of livelihood for themselves. Finance is nothing but a means of empowerment. It's a tools to move ahead. Which is why I'm even more delighted that Dr. Goyal accepted the invitation to be the guest of honor and to release this, well, not release, but to be here this evening, because he represents another critical arm of any society, which is government. We keep blaming, abusing, criticizing governments, but 90% of what we can't do, the government has been doing regardless. You know, when you walk around and when you see infrastructure and we talk about the history of India, or for that matter the history of Goa, within the Union of India, you will see governments have done far more than their pale of duty. Sadly, the bureaucrat can't be a politician, but tragically also gets the blame for the abuse that's heaped on politicians, which at times is equally unfair. So I think it's time for Indians and for all of us to recognize that we make the governments we have. But we've also got to respect the governments for the enormous amount of pressure they work under, the least of which is judicial intervention, which is cleverly crafted upon governments. But that is for another book. So may I invite Dr. Goan to say a few words, and then Rajnish and I will get into a conversation.
Mr. Rajnish Kumar and distinguished guests. So for me, it's a privilege to be here, and on two accounts. Firstly, because this book is coming, and I read this book even before at editing stage. So when Mr. Rajnish Kumar asked my inputs on the draft, and secondly, because he has been my role model since childhood. Not all of you may be knowing that he's my uncle, and always we used to be told my father, he's also here luckily, and he's also ex-SBI, that we have to emulate him. So in fact, I remember when I was preparing for IIT in the year 1982. So we were not going anywhere, no function, nothing. But Chachaji got married, so we were asked to go. And I went with my father in an old bus, and it was 6-7 hour journey from here. So because not only preparation but inspiration is also, for any success, inspiration is also equally important. And in the family, there was no better example than Mr. Rajnish. And of course, he also succeeded in prelims and went for mains also. But financial conditions were such that we had to join SBI. I was a little more lucky by the time of the family's condition had improved. I also got a job in Air India at that time from IIT. Because the family tradition was to look for PSU jobs or some government job. So I didn't join, and then I did my MTech and was preparing for IAS and IIT Delhi. So for both these counts, it was a very, very proud moment. And we all know about his what he has accomplished, not only being SBI but as a chairman also. Many issues like Yes Bank crisis, we all know. And I personally know that, of course, he was not chairman, and this demonetization happened. And finance ministry was seeking a lot of advice from him as MD. So I have read this book at least twice. One for editing, and second, in fact, I am very bad at reading, although Mr. Seth was saying that I have a lot of degrees.
Yes.
All these degrees happened because I thought on someday I will leave IAS. one batchmate of mine, she says that Puneet is who is always about to leave IAS, but has never left. So, but all my degrees are technical. Where reading is not so much required. But this book I have read twice, and it is very useful. Very useful for bankers, for the people who are students of Indian economy, but even for administrators. How he has handled HR in SBI, and in fact, one event I was there, and his better after how she used to carry along all the wives of all SBI employees. So he will always be role model. The book, I think everybody should read this book. And will always be there on us.
Public sector, and even fewer in business. How did you decide to write this book?
You were responsible for it.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I gave you the idea, but very few people listen to what I say. So
I'm one person listened to him. We were at a reception for late Mr. Arun Jaitley's son, Goan, and he says that so much work has happened in SBI, and he must document it and write a book. We people are not accustomed to writing books. We are accustomed to writing office notes or dictating office notes. I would do that, right? But he put me in touch with the publisher. We discussed the idea, and then because it's such a hectic job that idea got dropped. But then when I retired in October 20, and this was a period when COVID was also there, so nothing much to do. And then I picked up that idea that this is the time that I can utilize it for putting together my works. Initially it was a very tough task, but later on I realized that one, because you have computers today, so it is much easier to write a book. Whatever comes to your mind, you just type it and then put together, do the rearranging of chapters. The book is ready, so I started in December, and book was ready for printing in July 2020.
You know what Puneet said in the opening remarks is very interesting when he said that in the family we would only go into two areas. And that's true of almost 90% of India. And it doesn't matter whether you're middle class, upper class, whatever, because it's not only comfort, it's also respect. He also mentioned Air India. Now, can you imagine if we actually joined Air India, you'd be in the Tatas. What a great journey. You start with India, government of India, then you come into the Tatas. What better? So, when you began, when you finished college or as a student, what were the compulsions over you other than the financial thing? How did you decide on State Bank of India, and what was that initial journey?
I joined the State Bank of India in 1980, and that was a time when jobs were not available. And anyone who is considered to be good in studies, they will have only two options at that time other than engineering. Either you join IAS or you join SBI. And as Puneet was mentioning, preliminary I qualified twice. I mentioned in my book also. But mains I could not do. But as far as PO exam are concerned, I think anywhere I appeared, I did it all. So because these exams get pending, because they are objective type. So objective type, if you give me any subject, I will do it. So in IAS that because I took history, I am not a history student. But I passed because they were all objective type. So that much I know that how to be done. But anyway, and then I cleared many exams. Some of them, of course, my brother said that you can't join this, you can't join that. Because once you join, then you will be stuck here. So that was I would say, a bit bold back, because you don't want to leave a job which is coming your way, because it is a question of your survival also. But eventually, I think this was the next best thing which could happen, and the rest is all.
So, if you read Mr. Kumar's book, as I urge you to do, you will observe that it's a book of hard work, of application, not necessarily where many industry leaders say, oh, we were lucky. It's not about luck, it's about hard work, it's about application. How do you think, if you were to look back in those times and today, what has changed?
India has completely changed. That is the one thing, that if you look at economic advancement which India has done, and particularly after 91, and the emergence of IT sector, that is remarkable. In fact, when I was posted to Canada in 1996, and wherever we went, so we were looked down. These are from India. These people know nothing. And then I got second chance for being posted abroad in 2009, where I was heading UK operations. And within that 13 years, there was a complete change about how people perceive Indians. And that way, like great economic progress, maybe not for everyone, it is such a large population, but at least the middle class, the conditions which were prevalent in 1980 and which are prevalent today. So there is a huge difference. It is, all of us are maybe of that same age, so all of us know that what were the hardships then, and today our children live in much more comfort, they are financially secure. So that way, a lot of change in India, of course, by virtue of the fact that it is a very young demography, we are still one of the lowest as far as per capita income is concerned. So the potential for economic growth is also huge. So that way, like, I think there's a lot of hope also for India and influence.
So I want to pick up from what Prudent had said about that I studied and I kept studying because I may have left the IS at any time. Academia was very important, degrees were very important in that India. Today you're seeing a lot of young people who don't even go to college, and it's no longer important to go to college. And you've got the startup industry, you've got all these things. How has it impacted the quality of talent that is available for banks or for any organization?
So the startup, as you said, that they don't borrow for degrees, so their aspiration is Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all these people, they all started from garage and nobody has a degree. So to be a successful entrepreneur and businessman, time and again we can say even Dhirubhai Ambani in our own country. So it was not necessarily that you are very qualified. If you are very qualified, you will end up doing a job. If you are not as much qualified, you will be an entrepreneur. But again, as I said, that what changed for India IT industry? It was we said that there is a lot of brain drain and talent is migrating to USA. But there was also a reverse migration of at least ideas, if not physical. People may not have come back, but their ideas came to the country, and that is where Rajnish from IIT knows. When I joined the State Bank, we used to have several ideas in our bank. But
And
then,
now?
So because at that time, as I said, the economic conditions were such that you would find MPs and IITs joining the State Bank of India. You would, even the cricketers, all 11 of them at one point of time were in the State Bank of India. Before 98, you name any big cricketer, Vishen Singh, Vishwanath, all were in the State Bank of India. So the point is that it was the brain drain which we talk about. We may have felt that it is a loss to the country, but I feel that it has benefited the country in a big way. That relationship which happened with Silicon Valley, it has changed India a lot. And as I said today, it's an idea. And if you are able to implement it, conceptualize, then as far as money is concerned, that is not a problem. A huge amount of money is sitting there. You need a successful an idea and implement it, which is a very good thing.
So when you took over, obviously by then India had an advent of almost 20-25 years of privately run or privately owned large banks, whether it was an ICICI, whether it was an HDFC. Now, the question I'm going to ask you, it's a bit tricky. Is almost all the private banks, and he alluded to Yes Bank, they've all suffered scams. Why has there never been a scam at SBI? Is it that you are not allowed to sanction that larger loan?
No, we sanctioned the largest. No large loan in this country can happen without a state bank. No financial closure can happen in SBI, in this country, unless SBI is leading it or at least part of the consortium. But and not all private banks, they have this problem.
Yeah.
There are like HDFC is a shining example of.
I'm saying ICICI.
ICICI is a problem, Yes Bank we had a problem. One is that I am very proud of the DNA which State Bank has built over a period of time. And there is absolutely no doubt about it that if the State Bank has survived in one form or another for the last 206 years, it could have not done if the value system was built. No organization in the world can survive if it does not have a solid value system. You may get short-term success, but if your value system is weak, sooner or later it will collapse. So that is the differentiating factor. Rest is all about like individuals and their own value system, which we know in private banks, they have much more freedom of action. And at the same time, if the value system is weak, then, and particularly in the financial sector. In the financial sector, the first thing which was told in the State Bank of India, don't open your bank pen, nothing will happen. But you commit like some indiscretion of even 10 rupees and you're out. So that is a premium which is paid on the honesty and integrity. And as I said, that because you're dealing with money and it is not your money, it is other people's money, then this value system of very high level of integrity is a must. And SBI we had our own, it is such an obvious thing. There are some instances where we have problem for SBI also, including Rajnish Mehta is clear upon that. But largely it has come out of those situations well, because rank and file and from the top also. In a large organization like this, I would say that people do value there's a system where there is a premium on your personal integrity. They're not the best or the most confident people, but in terms of what SBI expects them to be, so they're, I think they're, but in, as I say that it's a 250,000 people organization, so I'm not guaranteeing that all 100% will be.
You know, I just want to say something aside. If you read the book, as I said, as you show, it's a very interesting chronicling of India, both economically and sociologically. It's very important to understand what Prudent said in his opening remarks and what Mr. Kumar is saying, in terms of the kind of imperatives that were before Indians and how certain Indians approach those imperatives. Like, I was born and raised in Calcutta. Our value system is exactly, you know, and plus now with Mamta there is nothing to steal. So even if someone wants to steal a bank, there is nothing to steal. So, you know, I mean, that's another issue.
Whatever was there
has come. I said on Twitter, I said there are more advertisements for TMC than functioning coconut trees. Everywhere she has covered, you can't see the sea anymore. Anyway, that is something else that we will figure out on the 10th of March. But the value system you spoke about and the DNA, that is, ironic as it may be, and therefore, thankfully, it exists in our government. It exists in our public sector to this day. I mean, the kind of people, I know when Anil Agarwal bought over those companies, you know, whether it was Hindustan Zinc, or in the good old days, Lakshmi Mittal's top hires were all former Steel Authority people. Even Anil Agarwal hired a former Steel Authority chairman. So there was this vast repository of talent in the public sector. So obviously you people should be given the Bharat Ratna because you are doing this for zero compensation. Now, with people becoming more and more avarice-ridden or greed-driven, do you think the talent pool will change and therefore impact the value system?
No, I don't. Because as I have said, that I have a believer there. If your value system is weak, you can go only this distance, but not go this distance. So sooner or later, you will be caught in your own trap. And if you are running a company, it is bound to collapse. If you are yourself, your personal life is going to be. So it is better to keep your affairs, particularly financial affairs, absolutely clean. And when the tone is set at the top, and both in terms of what you preach and what you practice. The biggest problem also arises when you don't practice what you preach. Then there is a loss of credibility of the leader. So leaders' credibility is also equally important. That comes when because people watch. Down the line they watch you, then what he is doing. And this is not a hidden thing. You can't identify. Once they have that belief in their leader that there is no personal agenda but all about the welfare of the organization, and I think that things happen. So anyone who compromises the personal integrity, they can have short-term service. We have seen that. We have seen a rising star like this and then.
So let me pick a couple of, to my mind, watershed moments in the last 8 years or 9 years. I was there with the late Arun Jaitley on November 8, 2016, when after the Prime Minister at 8 o'clock made that announcement of demonetization. And the first thing Jaitley asked me jokingly was, how much cash do you have? I said about 11 rupees, but 1 rupee is in a coin. So he says, घर पे? I said, आपकी सरकार ने छोड़ा ही कितना है? I said, but I'm waiting for 15 lakhs from Modi to be transferred. He said 15 lakhs will be transferred. वो भी नहीं हुआ. But I saw a lot of people starting to make calls at about 9:30, including, who I will not mention the name, an owner of large amount of malls in Delhi. And JP says, now make sure that all these malls have some inspectorate or some directorate, catching these people. But demonetization was, it may have been whatever they were planning to do, you today have more black money. It created havoc for farmers. India at that time, people were saying, is a 67% cash economy. You were in the driving seat. You, as he said, were being consulted by the finance minister. What were the challenges you faced as a banker, as an Indian, and as someone who was responsible for stabilizing the ship?
So one, it was obviously it was a big chaos. And I can say with some degree of responsibility that if it was not for the State Bank of India, I don't know what would have been the consequences. Because it was the manpower, the logistics, the planning which went into it by State Bank of India by virtue of its reach and our capability to handle volumes. So we were able to handle the situation. Now about the black money, I think there is a little bit of a confusion. Cash does not mean black money.
Absolutely.
So again, we have to be very clear about it. It could be cash, but today I pay tax and I withdraw 10 lakh rupees from my account. There's a cash. There is a question of any black money if it has been a tax. So somebody might have given a thought that this would be the best way to serve the black money, but maybe that thought what the rationale was not scientific. So that was, I think, second is that even many developed economies like Germany, Japan, there is still largely cash economies.
Absolutely. America.
So that's a question of evidence. So cash cannot be equated with black money. And third is, of course, like Indians are very, ingenuity of Indians has to be admired. So the people who don't even throw the newspaper, and they will think they are 500 or 1,000 rupees, just like that. It cannot happen. So there was I would say, an error of judgment in judging the ingenuity of Indian people. And that's what happened. But it was definitely a logistics nightmare for the bankers. We had women who were in family and they were many those counters. And again, that shows that such a huge burden or expectations from bank staff for no consideration, and people was not right up to midnight. But again, we will say, I am right here. There were no cases of misdemeanor mistake.
Yeah, not one.
You might have heard about all private sector banks,
Yeah.
but nobody came to the State Bank of India.
Absolutely. I mean, cooperative banks were in the racket a lot, but no one mentioned state.
The state bank. And very efficiently. And again, the same thing, that the message was very loud and clear. I distinctly remember that when I spoke to my CGMs on time, I said, any investigation, we are off to suspend. Immediately. We will see later on and investigate and find out whether he was wrong or right. But this event, I think first day we suspended somebody. Chennai and Norway's communication systems were fast. So like we spreads like that. Two people like suspending Chennai, and that was the.
No, but what impact did it have on the economy, especially the agricultural economy, the farm economy? Because that led for a lot of time. You know, I advise a lot of companies, one of them was in multiple agri-businesses. They suffered grievously, because the farmers suffered.
But at that point, later on, the economy has been demonetized. And unfortunately, in this country, the position of farmers, even after 77 years of independence, has remained very bad. There are two reasons for it. Very two clear reasons for it. One, the large percentage of population is dependent on agriculture. There is not enough employment. So when the share of agriculture is 15% in your GDP, and number of people dependent on agriculture is 50%.
That's correct.
So obviously there is a problem. Unless you bring this 35% extra people to the industry or services sector, there will be a problem. Farming worldwide is not a very viable profession. Everywhere governments have to support it. It is not only in India. And our productivity in agriculture continues to be very poor. But I would be more encouraged by what is happening. And there are a huge number of agri-techs which are coming. And they are coming with a lot of innovative solutions. So when we are employing latest technology for now our farming activities, I believe that we can see an improvement in productivity of the farm sector. But it's just poor productivity, so obviously people are.
In coming back, as we wind down, coming back to, see, I don't want to reveal what's in the book because then, most people don't buy it. So I want to veer the discussion towards the experiences and challenges. He mentioned it, and it's a truism. Yes Bank's failure was not about the failure of a bank. It was the failure of trust. It was the letting down of people's belief that the private sector can and will work. People knew about Rana Kapoor even before this happened, but everyone turned a blind eye. It was the toast of town, blah, blah, blah. When Yes Bank collapsed, and I want to use that analogy which you so brilliantly mentioned in the opening pages of the book. Here you had two made in India brands with made in India people, we hope. What were the thoughts that went through your mind? Because Jet Airways was an outstanding airline.
Absolutely.
And Yes Bank had done so well so soon. So what were those thoughts and how did you address them?
So one is, it's not only about Yes Bank and Jet Airways, and many times people have asked this question or made this observation. I view an enterprise as an enterprise, irrespective of its ownership, whether it is owned by the government or it is owned by the private sector. It is a national asset. Whether you close a private enterprise or you close a government-owned enterprise, it means loss of revenue, loss of taxation, loss of employment. And my favorite example is that when Tata Steel wanted to close some of its operation in UK, their minister came running to Bombay.
Yeah.
So why did he come? Because they are so concerned about protecting the jobs. Even if you invest, say, 100,000, 200,000 pounds, they will be out. They can invest in money.
And it's interesting, Tatas today are the single largest employer in the United Kingdom. It's an interesting fact. And this is without Air India. So it's the single largest employer as a group in the United Kingdom.
So the thought is always that we should make every effort that an enterprise does not fail. And if it has reached such a situation that it cannot be revived, then because time is now we have a process where it can be accepted or it can be allowed to die its death. It's allowed to die because it is ultimately in capitalist world survival of the fittest. And Yes Bank, it came very late to State Bank. When it was on the verge of, I can say, and if we had delayed it by say 10 days, 23rd March or 22nd March was the lockdown declared.
So who would have lost money? Let's say if State Bank hadn't helped Yes Bank, who would have been the major sufferer?
The State Bank of India. Because RBI would have no solution and will not check with me. It was the most. What else they would do? They will say the Rajnish Kumar is not your baby, you take it. So at least by acting fast and putting together all this system.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm telling you, RBI would have been left with no choice, but they have all the powers under the Banking Regulation Act. They would have said we can't allow depositor to suffer, so it is your problem. So at least I acted smartly and put together. So save the State Bank, save the statement, and the financial system of the country. And Jet Airways, the problem was there was no one who had the kind of authority which Reserve Bank has in respect of the bank. So we need someone who can say no, this has to be done.
And Jet Airways?
That's the problem in aviation sector. You have nobody.
No regulator.
No regulator, nobody. बंद हो जाते हैं. So that is the.
Now there's also a person who's very close or was close to the Goan ethos, not ethos, the Goan home or the Goan heart Palya. What happened? And State Bank was the lead banker in that consortium. Now I'm just making a normal statement. It's not taking anyone's side. Today, the government has recovered more money than he owes. The Supreme Court last week made a very important observation. They said that the government spends a fortune and time in chasing these people. Why don't they do a deal where these people pay and then are allowed to come back? So I'm not interested in what the Supreme Court said, I mean with due respect to the Supreme Court, but how do you view this whole thing about industrialists being made into fugitives, whereas businesses must be allowed to fail? Yes, if there is money laundering, round tripping, arrest the person and throw away the keys. But India and Indians are very castigating of business failure. Why is that?
Indians are, on the other hand, worshippers of Lakshmi also. We cannot forget them. So we are very confused people, let me tell you.
Super.
Confused about Lakshmi. They worship it and they hate it. Oh. So what is that? Every society, हमारे एग्जाम्पल है दरिद्र नारायण. अगर आप वो कृष्णा की लाइन पढ़ेंगे तो उसमें भी देखेंगे कि लाइक पुअर और गॉड, तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट बहुत दिमाग में खड़ा है. And that is when somebody succeeds, then people don't like it. But at the same time, if you don't have entrepreneurs, you don't have businessmen, you don't have rich people, then who will drive the economy, who will create the jobs? But you can't change a nation's cycle just like that, and we have been fed on the diet of socialism also for a very long time where poverty is worshipped. And the rest of the countries, Russia, China, they all made their rights. We are still continue to be a country of prosperity, whether we want capitalism or we want socialism, whether we want rich people or we don't want rich people. But you take the example of China. First they said create the wealth. Now they have created the wealth. Now they say distribute.
And now they're clamping down. Whether
Then
it's Jack Ma
now
or
they
anyone.
तो पहले कुछ distribute करने के लिए there should be something to distribute. And we keep on distributing poverty. So that attitude that might used to change, as you mentioned, that wrong practices. So there is a law, and law we must go after them. And on the other hand, we Indians love to break the law.
Absolutely.
So that is another problem. And then blame the government in their analysis.
So since we are in Goa, I want to focus a bit on Goa. And I've said this in an interview earlier as well. There is so much going for Goa. It could become, to my mind, easily a high-value tourism destination, much like Kerala is. I'm not getting into mining and those issues because those are contentious issues before courts of law. More and more people have done work from home in Goa, and I believe if marketed properly, Goa can become the pivot of India's IT businesses, because people want to work in places they love. No one, I mean, I hate to say that, I also happen to live there partly. No one likes Delhi.
Yeah.
But people like the environment, the people here, the local. What do you feel has gone wrong in Goa becoming, to my mind, a very powerful and yet eco-sensitive, ethical state? Has it been the lack of capital? Has it been the lack of support? Or perhaps the lack of political governance?
So first, this thing, and I don't mind it, but all of you and all of us come to Goa, it will be on there. So let us not make
I
it there.
totally agree. I totally agree.
We should not make it there. It has a certain character, it has to be maintained. So if we have reckless construction in a state like this, then again you will lose some beauty, you will lose it. So it is a very delicate task here. We want it to be developed economically. But by the way, Goa is the highest per capita economy.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
the highest per capita.
highest per capita income, and this is always a challenge that without losing its ecological balance, and still if you can develop it, that would be ideal. And if you see like countries like Hong Kong, this is such a small idea, but 70% green, 30% construction. Singapore, so they have grown vertical. I don't know that vertical development for a state like Goa would be good. So basically, that balance, ecological balance, and where we don't create ugly structures all around. So that should be. Otherwise, you will lose its beauty. And there should be a ban on Delhi Palace to buy property.
I couldn't second that more. I am fighting my little battles about trying to ban any car that can drive above 40, because people are driving as if they are driving in the well of death. So I totally go with what you're saying. I want to ask you two last questions and then we wind down. From where you were and where you are, you have seen the economy, you have seen aspiration, and you've seen delivery. People aspire for a great livelihood. You know, I'm a great believer when people ask me from a marketing point of view, what does a person buy? You never buy the drill, you buy the hole. You're buying the drill so that it can make the perfect hole. Aspiration, we're a young country, demographically we keep talking about the dividend, I don't know when that dividend check will come. Third is empowerment. There are lots of things, by the way, that the government does, including the central government. But what has happened is, sadly, people know them for their lack of taste of beef rather than their appetite for investment. I mean, this is the tragedy of our country. But that poor communication will be handled by, the two people at the top. Where do you see the challenges for today's India? Forget tomorrow's India. What, to your mind, are the 2 or 3 challenges that India must address with ferocity?
So one is, of course, the policy for protecting it. Second is, I think that the bureaucratic delays at the lower level, or when we talk about ease of doing business. So So it is on paper. The ease of doing business at local level is very system. You get any work done without a problem at local level. I think that there won't be a single example. So the reforms at local level, say even civic administration, we don't have people who have any understanding of planning, civic administration. There is no reform like that. So one is, as I said, that policy which enables investment. Second is execution, and third is the capabilities at the lower level. We have some brilliant people like University of He created in Delhi from the waste to the
yeah.
So it's a perfect example. But there are not many people who have that kind of vision or motivation. So what will happen that suppose Panjim as a city, and if you hand it over to, with again you, it's not all politicians. If you hand it to politicians, they will respond. If you hand it to IAS, they will be there for 6 months, 1 year. So there is no personal commitment or attachment or alignment with the value system of that particular place. And that is where the problem is, that nobody has a stake, that my city should be beautiful, neat, clean. The biggest challenge is how to create that kind of a garden or a system of governance where it is clean, which is again a very clean in every sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ethically clean, monetarily clean, all of that. And my last question, and before we open it out for a quick Q&A, my last point is, there are all the challenges you faced. And you know, for those of you who don't know, and therefore you must read the book, one of the things that Rajnish Kumar did was, he altered the functioning of the State Bank of India without altering its DNA. It's a very difficult thing to do. I'm not saying this because, you know, I work with him, blah, blah, blah. The only other person I've seen do that is Ratan Tata when he took over from GRP. It's very difficult to change the business and not change the DNA. Because sometimes the DNA demands placidness, compassion, empathy, and lethargy. How did you do what you did with State Bank, where you altered everything but you left the soul intact?
Yeah, so again we are coming back to the same thing, that if you want a grand building, you have to have a very strong foundation. And the State Bank being 200 years old, so even you need to, you know, strengthen the foundation again. And that is where, like if you read some book, and in my first letter to the employees also, I outlined that what is going to be the value system, which is steps. It is around service, transparency, ethics, politeness, sustainability. This would be the foundation. And everybody from right top to bottom, and we just, you look at that time in State Bank, everywhere you will find this. Every building, lift, lobby, and certification that I have imbibed the value system. So first starting point was that we reinstate or reinforce the foundation. And once you are convinced that you have done that, and then it is, as I said, that your vision about what you want to do and your credibility as a leader. Why should anybody follow you? Just merely for the simple fact that you happen to be a chairman and people should follow you. They don't. On your face they will follow you, but otherwise they don't follow you what you say. But once there is a complete alignment between what you are saying, what you are doing, you have outlined the vision, no confusion signals. That today you say, today morning this is to be done, next morning you say this is to be done, third day next week. This used to happen with government. So like every day the priority would change. So but all that would stop at my desk. For my people at the ground, it was continuity of the direction. Otherwise, if we change priority every day, then also it causes a lot of confusion in the minds of people. So I think that whatever should not go to them and whatever is coming from the government, so everything but would stop at my table, and I am accountable and responsible to the company, but organization I am running the way I wanted to run, and I was lucky, I would say, that I had a very good management team to support, and through my personal connect with people where I would go to branches. There's every individual has their own working style, but I got a fantastic response from the organization in terms of whatever we want to do. So outlining the vision, value system, and then execution.
Excellent. So now we'll open it out for a question and answer session. My only request would be ask questions and not make a comment. And if you could introduce yourself before asking the question, so that we just know the context, not that we couldn't carry your names to the KGB or CIA. This is the best kind of audience.
Srinivas Tempo. Sir, I wanted to ask you, what do you see where the future of corporate lending is going?
Corporate lending?
Yeah, and I think Swin touched it a little bit. We talked about corporate failures. I see increasingly banks, and I'm not only talking about State Bank. State Bank is much better in that respect. But most of the banks, unless you give your personal guarantee for one, just irrespective of the appraisal of the project, don't lend. If you look at increasingly in the Western world, also banks don't lend. And you know, the corporate bond market has flourished. You know, there are other instruments where, you know, corporates borrow. What's your feeling? Will India go towards the same trend? And will corporate lending reduce from the banks and there will be other avenues?
It has happened to a very large extent. Even for State Bank of India, when I took charge, we were 60% corporate, 40% retail. Now in 6 years' time, 7 years' time, it is reverse. 60% retail and 40% corporate.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it has changed because everybody from top to bottom is comfortable doing retail business. Housing loan you do, no accountability, no problem. Car loan you do, no problem. Corporate loan, one loan goes bad and then you have all sorts of problems. So that is very difficult to change. But still, I think if corporates also blend their ways and whatever has happened and we put behind us, then I think there will be scope. There's scope for lending for the banks. Personal guarantee, I am very clear that it should not be asked, otherwise you are with the concept of
Absolutely.
so that was the whole idea about limited liability was that when we say that there should be no personal guarantee, then as a promoter also it is your responsibility to act as a trustee. You can't be having both.
Yes.
Either like you treat company as a distinct entity yourself and say that banks insist for personal guarantee because promoters do not distinguish between a company and a proprietorship.
But then Chidambaram said brilliantly, he says India has sick industries but never a sick industrialist. The industrialists always make money. And most. And Srinivas, let's be very honest, in the good old days, and this continued, whatever one may say about Modi's politics, he has cleaned up the system. And the reason is he has no one to bother about, no family, no nothing. I mean, other than his mother. What has happened is, the system earlier was a loot for all.
Yeah.
I mean, what we saw in the telecom business, what we saw in aviation, competition, the same Jet Airways, I'll say this publicly, 25 years Jet Airways opposed Singapore Airlines and Tata's to come together. 25 years. And I've not said this only here, I've said it on television. They were running amok. Promoters were flying their pets in corporate jets. I mean, this was the bane of the, and I mean, again, I get into enough trouble on my own. Some of your venerable bankers, who even today you hold like, I can't even give you initials because it's very difficult not to know. They now have children who are running funds into which companies on the boards of which they sit have to put money in. Now you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. It's a racket. So how do you prevent this? I mean, you're right, value system is fine. But the common man, if the common man wants to go for a loan, so it's that old saying, if you owe the bank 30,000 rupees, the bank will chase, you will chase the bank or something.
Yeah.
But if you owe the bank 300,000 rupees, the bank will be. It's a bizarre situation.
But I think a lot of startups have, like the introduction of IBC is a very good step.
Yeah.
Even I think the businesses also realize that it is better to pay tax rather than. And otherwise, bankers used to have 3 balance sheets. They put one for income tax, one for bank, one for obviously bank is a problem. It was a 3 balance sheet problem.
So, if there are no more questions, may I ask? Yeah, please.
Yes.
If you see some of the private sector, I'm Sakaraya. If you see some of the private sector banks, the way in which they have grown is multifold. Whereas if you see the same growth last 20 years SBI, what kind of growth is? It is nothing much. But if even though all the government accounts are with SBI, but still growth is not there, whereas the private sector banks like HDFC or ICICI is growing in multifold. In your opinion, what should SBI policy makers should decide to change to make the bank much better than the current situation?
So I will give you a little bit of a sense. If we grow at 10%, we create one private sector bank in a year. My balance sheet is 45 lakh crore. Deposit base is 35 lakh crore. So when I grow 10%, it means 3.5 lakh crore. How many banks at that size of balance sheet? At least the State Bank of India. I'm not talking about other public sector banks. Probably if you had said this thing for other public sector banks, it would have been true. But the State Bank of India, our market share is intact, despite all the competitors. But in a country like India, having a market share of 22% in such a competitive scenario and hold on to it is not a very easy task. So in terms of percentage, it will always do. We have not grown as fast. But if you look at the absolute figures, then as I said, every year we create a mid-sized bank.
Are you in
With
agreement?
the same people, 250,000 people. In 1980 when I joined the bank, we were 250,000. In 2022 we are 250,000, our 6 banks have been merged. 7 banks have been merged.
But what was amazing, what has been amazing is State Bank's journey and engagement in technology. I mean, you know, they don't talk about it, but you ask people who bank with SBI and with private banks, and they tell you that banking with SBI in terms of internet banking online is way better than with private banks. Yes, sir, you had a question. Mike?
I don't know how to make a question short, but we have to very quick provide.
Tell us your name.
Timur.
Excellent.
And usually when I built this hotel, it took me 13 years to build this hotel.
For permissions.
I had to go to the Supreme Court to get permission to build it. And I've come to the ease of doing business there. I met the chairman.
13 years.
13 years, 2007, I got
I
an
remember
order.
when he was negotiating the deal with us. I
No,
remember.
that is only 13 months. But I'll tell you why.
How long did Shah Jahan take to build this Taj Mahal?
13 years. I think I
See, there you are. You are modern day Shah Jahan. At least be happy. We should rename you Shah Jahan
I
Timno.
don't want to bankrupt my treasury, I just want to make money.
Terrific.
Thank you. I also have memory when after the Indian Army walked into Goa on 19 December 61, State Bank walked behind. And I was present here as
My
a
God.
student, and there was an officer called Gadre. I do not know if the bankers remember him, but he brought about seamless banking in Goa within 24 hours. Goa didn't feel the issue of going out and rupee coming. Now that's part of Mr. P.G. Kapoorkar's memoir, just like your is from memoir. And here's when we started banking this state bank, and I'll come to the crux of another matter. That time we wanted a bank, but they cashed our letter of credit and gave us rupees. We started the relationship in December. We were the first bank of the state bank. Much later came in Mr. R.K. Talwar, and he said, I want this
Account.
This account. And my father said, no personal guarantee. He said, no personal guarantee. That was the time. So you brought up the subject of personal guarantee versus limited liability. And we were in the state bank through and through.
Even today.
That's what I want to come to. We are not entire. And that's what the sadness exists there. Because State Bank of today is a great bank, but not as great as it was before 1976. And I'll come to the 76 incident when R.K. Talwar refused to bow down to Sanjay Gandhi. And they were so upset in Delhi that midnight they brought an amendment to the State Bank Act that they could remove the chairman. They wanted to remove the chairman prior to that, but it was a constitutional block. Talwar stood his ground. He said, unless the finance secretary orders me the writing to give the money to a particular account, I will not let.
Superb.
And that was the turning point when the State Bank's chairman lost his one disc in his back. And finally, it broke my heart when I saw the present finance minister heading the State Bank chairman.
Absolutely.
I couldn't bear it.
Because
And I'm glad you're giving me
I'm
an
so
opportunity
happy
to
you have
stand
said
up
this.
here and
I'm
say
so
that.
happy you have said this.
And if they were going against the criticism of the previous bureaucracy and the government, they could have changed back the act, the original act, to give State Bank chairman a full backbone instead of half of it.
No one will do it, sir. In India, once government controls,
So it's government
everything else
versus.
for them to give up.
So now, State Bank to me is a great bank, but it's more like a sponge to absorb the toxicity of the Indian economy. Despite that, they stand there. Please, we need to help the banking sector, led by State Bank, to provide stock observers to Yes Banks, Jet Airways, and then weaken themselves. If you weaken State Bank further,
You
you
weaken
weaken
it.
their economy.
Yeah.
So
100%.
It took me 2017, now 15 years to build this hotel brick by brick. The first 12 years of the bricks were only in the Supreme Court. Finally, Supreme Court gave me the permission, go ahead and build it. And banks have said, I need a permission from the planning authority. I said, I want permission from Supreme Court. No, I want from planning authority. The planning authorities in Goa, with due respect to the Chief Secretary, sir, they are polluted, adulterated, and they cannot do what exactly means of business doing permits or should. And I'm saying this because I'm in Goa for 1,000 years. State Bank has been in Goa for 61 years. And I can tell you it's going from frying pan to fire.
No, just since the Chief Secretary is also
No, let me
here,
just finish.
one last point I want to ask you.
Yes.
I'm a great believer that Indians have a problem for every solution. Now you give me the solution for a problem. If Goa has a problem, you've been here for 1,000 years, what are the two quick things that you think should happen in Goa? And then we'll ask Puneet.
As much as it should happen, the rest of the
Forget the rest. What should happen here?
autonomy.
I will what Mr. is saying. Basically, he's talking about ease of doing business. And today, if you have to take a construction loan, this hotel is like there are a lot of issues. Maybe I don't know whether you see as I also putting, but even for a simple hotel, it takes. So basically, it has to get issues of getting how to get construction permit. So this construction permit is an issue not only in India but all over the world. So World Bank has now they have stopped for last 2 years. They used to bring out a ease of doing business report every year.
And ranking.
So in ranking there were six parameters, and construction permit was one parameter. So for India, when they evaluate for India, they take cities of Bombay and cities of Delhi. These two cities, city of Bombay and Delhi. So our rank in the year 2014, 15 was 180. We were in the last.
And now?
Now I will tell the process. Lot of reforms were done. I can probably say that I was the Commissioner South MCD for 4 years and I was in charge for the and we basically would have been fair. We brought such a software. There is only a single woman.
Correct.
Now in Delhi, I was the South MCD Commissioner in charge and city, DDA, for Indians. There also they are multiple. It is files were lying for 4 years, 5 years, like that. So there is now one software. You don't have to deal with anybody.
No human being.
No fire department. Nothing. Only 30 days you have. I think the department MCD has to decide either reject or out. Otherwise, we with the help of Mr. D.S. Krishna. So we brought reforms, the act also we made changes. But more important, it was the software, very robust software. So now the rank of Delhi, and I used to go every year with Mr. D.S. Krishna presentation in World Bank. Our rank improved when I left, it was 30.
1-3.
One thing. Bombay was 52, and jointly India came from 185 to 26.
So India is now at 26.
As far as
Only because
but two cities.
only 2 cities. But apart from the act,
Thank God you didn't include Goa.
I will tell you why not only this IT thing, but we delegated all the powers. Like Commissioner, no file was given, not even to additional commissioner, not even to chief engineer. We gave all the powers to executive. So everything is recorded. He can't do any work. And
Correct.
Everything is recorded in the IT. In fact, there was a competition. I ran a competition on the MCDs that who can do the fastest.
Approval.
So one approval we gave in 3 minutes. Because everything is checked by AutoCAD. There is no need to check anything. That's what here we require 2 things. One is IT, and secondly now here every file goes to the minister. So,
Yeah. You see, Mr. Timno, many years ago I said, whenever India has a Prime Minister who is either very old or is asleep, India does far better because then their capacity to damage reduces. India made rapid progress when Deva Gowda was there.
press is there, there should not
And
go.
true with Mr. Narasimha Rao, and true with Narasimha Rao too, because he took very few decisions.
Yeah, very
So things were kept pending, so there was again less damage.
Chalo, on this note,
एक
please.
चीज मैं और बोल दूं एक चीज और about what happened in the finance. But I can tell you another finance investor. I used to meet quite frequently Mr. Jaitley. We solved his Firuzshah Kotla issue.
I know.
So he had developed a liking for me. So I used to meet him every.
He was like family for me,
I
yeah.
used to meet him every second, third month. So one day he was sitting, he was eating his parathas, and I could see that after that bariatric surgery, still he was eating
Still,
parathas.
Gulchas and all that rubbish.
So he didn't know, I never revealed about my occupation. So he was telling about chairman SBI. So he was saying that I will rate Mr. Rajnish Kumar 9 out of 10. And another 2 names he took, that I will rate 6 out of 10, another one 3 out of 10. So,
But he was very fond of him.
He was very fond.
In fact, Jaitley passed away on August 25, 2019. And Rohan's marriage was in February 2020. And he was an invitee. Like technically, if the list was being decided by the
persons
yeah.
before Mr. expired.
So if the list was being
Before
decided by
I-
someone else, you would have not. It was more his belief and the family. Yes, Mr. Jimlo.
I did take up the point with Mr. Jaitley, and he said he's going to look into the matter of changing the State Bank Act. So Chairman cannot be touched and hidden. Second, Mr. Bird is talking about permissions. Permissions pertaining to bureaucracy, politician, chairman, everything. That doesn't matter. Because we were advised, don't rely on this permission. Supreme Court will get them, slash them anymore. And the judge did it. 2009, one judge said, demolish a hotel. There was not even a prayer of the NGO.
Can I tell you with due respect, not to be quoted, the judiciary is as free as it chooses to be and as irresponsible at times as it chooses to be. You have seen in Kerala what they've done. They've destroyed any contempt. I'm saying. See, truth is the best form of defense in contempt. And I'm not saying they're corrupt. I'm saying many orders are passed where the practicality. In Kerala, when they blew up those two, they brought up those two buildings, the people who suffered were the investors. The same thing with Supertech in Delhi.
January 2009, an order was passed, break it down. That was not even the prayer of our existing South Korea High Court. And there was no way out because Supreme Court said it. And finally, sir, I tell you, never it has happened in India. Entire assembly of the Goa legislature met and passed the legislation only to overcome the judgment. And finally, Supreme Court apologizes 10 years later. Sorry.
See, I've always said this, and now we can have some fun. And the media appreciates what I'm going to say. You should now just buy the government. You have built the hotel in 13 years, buying a government and creating a government here will take 3 days. It's all transactional. On that note, we better get up. I don't want to be taken up with 1 minute. Vincent will say a word of thanks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think it was a wonderful tete-a-tete and we carry home some wonderful moments. Honorable Chief Secretary, thank you so much. Mr. Kumar, Mr. Sen, Chairman Sir, Mr. Timlo, thank you so much. Mr. Dempo, and all the August gathering here. Sorry I can't take everyone's name. The press, of course, for coming here. And let us have a few moments together. We have little cocktails and some little snacks. We can heat up. I wish we could show you the sunset. So pretty from here. But enjoy the evening. Thank you so much for coming over. And I'm sure you'll carry these memories back. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.